Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome, everyone, to the Community IT webinar, the 2024 Nonprofit Cybersecurity Incident Report with Matthew Eshleman. My name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Outreach Director for Community IT. I'll be the moderator today. So, Matt, would you like to introduce yourself?
I've been at Community IT and involved in the nonprofit tech sector for over 20 years and initiated this nonprofit cybersecurity incident report as a way to provide information that's specific to the sector about the threats that are facing our nonprofit clients. I think we've covered a lot of this in terms of the cybersecurity tech. I will say, I think the first one here, right, phishing is more dangerous. And so again, that's email that's sent to the organization. And I typically am categorizing that as email that has some sort of obfuscated sender that's kind of, hiding the identity, right? So it's different than spam. Spam is just junk messages. It's pretty easy. We don't want this, right? But phishing, again, is obfuscating the sender of the message. It's including some links, something to click, right? It's kind of that first step in what we'll look at here, which could potentially be an attacker-in-the-middle attack where they're going to be looking at stealing credentials and your MFA token as well. So again, phishing is more dangerous. I think we need to be aware of these in person and kind of including a physical element into some of the attacks. As Carolyn shared, and kind of we've certainly seen, lots of, these pop-ups leading to social engineering attacks are still quite common, and the rise of this QR codes, right, getting outside of the controls of your protected corporate IT environment and kind of softer targets, maybe your home computer, your personal cell phone, that kind of thing. Again, having other ways, right, text-based attacks, again, all of this building credibility to, ultimately try to get some sort of financial gain. Now, the MFA, the last bullet point here is that MFA-enabled accounts can now be compromised by attacker-in-the-middle attacks. And so I think this is the biggest significant change that we've seen in the past year, and it's a result of some weaknesses in some authentication processes that exist, with the authenticator app method.
And I'm really curious to hear about this new attack, the attacker-in-the-middle attack, because for years we've been telling everyone, if you have MFA, you're really protected.
With the attacker-in-the-middle attack, it starts, as a lot of attacks do, with email. So in this case, right, so we have an email message. In this case, it could come from an obfuscated sender. We've also seen this happen, again, if a partner organization has an account compromised, the adversary will then use that trusted account in order to send messages that include a link to be clicked on. Again, this is another good reason why, if you're in your kind of anti-spam controls, right, we don't want to, if we can help it, avoid just automatically approving and accepting messages from, partner organizations, because that could open up, us to additional attacks if that attacker manages to compromise an account. So in this case, Microsoft has a really great overview of how this works in great technical detail. If you want to read it, we'll dig up the link. But this is, I think, the helpful elements to see, right? So starting off with an email from a legitimate source or perhaps an obfuscated source. But the idea is that we're going to click on this link to open up the document that was shared with us. Now, this is where we actually see the attack. Instead of going to Contoso, the actual address in the address bar is, some variant, right? And so this is the actual proxy attack that the hacker has set up, so that instead of going directly to your Office 365 login page, you're going through a proxy. And so the proxy is in between your account and Office 365. What makes this so difficult to protect against is that everything that you are then going to see actually looks like your Office 365 sign-in page. So again, if you have a customized sign-in page with maybe your logo or like some pictures, and you would see that, but you have to be paying attention in this address bar, which is sometimes hard to do. And so again, we have this proxy. So instead of Contoso, we're going to go to this like subvariant. And then it's actually taking us to the real sign-in page. So there's just that, brief moment where we need to, kind of acknowledge or look at the proxy as we kind of pass through it. But from this point on, anything that the kind of targeted user fills in is able to be stolen by the threat actor. And so what we often will then see is the hacker will get the session, right? They'll steal the session. They'll log in or appear to log in as the user. They will add their own MFA method in order to be MFA compliant. And then they will, kind of lurk. And then typically at this point, then they'll typically work to build up into some sort of financial attack, monitor emails, kind of build the attack from there. But it all really starts with that malicious message, clicking on a link, taking them through a proxy where their session can be stolen. So that's the kind of the new thing that we've really seen, and the impact of that has been significant. So if we look at the incidents that we have seen at Community IT, right? So we have about 180 clients. We're supporting about 7,000 users that are nonprofit clients, kind of all over the U.S. We've kind of categorized them in a couple different areas: high risk threats, medium risk, and low. And so you may be surprised, right? I mean, things down here low, right? Like virus, malware, like those pop-ups, and spam. Again, can be ignored. And if we look at that, the relative rate, 12 viruses over 7,000 computers in a whole year, right? It just doesn't happen that often. But the things that do have pretty significant impact when they do occur are things like brute force attacks. These are attacks that are typically targeted towards on-prem kind of network physical infrastructure. So again, basically, if you have any type of server with any type of access that is coming in, from the internet, that system is will be attacked if there's any misconfiguration in your firewall. And so that's something that we see all the time. So whenever we're onboarding new organizations, our system is specially tuned to look for this. It lights up all the time. And so then that's a cue for us to we need to update firewalls or reconfigure things. So again, that remote desktop server, that tends to be targeted quite often. The compromised accounts, right? So if we had 44 cases of compromised accounts at our clients, and as opposed to previous years where this was, these were all accounts that didn't have multi-factor authentication, I think in 2023, that was kind of not the case, right? We've done I think a really good job and had a big focus on enabling MFA, but because of this attacker-in-the-middle approach and the ability to steal session tokens, that those MFA controls can be subverted now, and hackers are using that with pretty good success, I would say. So I think that's kind of the big number that really jumped out at me for 2023.
The next slide has the increases, which I just was really stunned to see.
As we've been doing this for 6 years, I think the thing that really stuck out to me when I was looking at the data is just the increase, particularly in compromised accounts, right? So in 2022, we only had 17 compromised accounts. I guess we were feeling good with the effects of implementing MFA widely, but now we're kind of up over 150% because of these new attack types being able to subvert that multi-factor authentication control. Again, in the same way, I think we just see the brute force attacks as just an indication of how sophisticated and automated these attacks are, right? So there's just kind of this massive online scanning. And as soon as there's a vulnerability or a misconfiguration, then that begins to be targeted. And so, in previous years, it was only open RDP ports. Now it's, kind of any open port to the internet, they're finding new ways to kind of target and try to launch, these large scale attacks to try to find and use credentials against the organization. Unfortunately, across the board, with the exception of, some kind of malware, which we would classify as, kind of those browser pop-ups or kind of unwanted things, right? It's not, it's annoying, but it's not gonna, impact your computer and then spread to the computer next to you, right? Like a virus would. The numbers are up overall. I think things that we would traditionally think of as like, oh, that's a really big cybersecurity issue, like viruses or like ransomware, is still very, very low compared to attacks that are coming through email, and then ultimately following up and kind of being realized as, kind of wire fraud and financial based attacks. I think the other piece that we can see with a little bit more detail is just the spam and the amount of spam and business kind of email compromise or spear phishing that we can see over time. And so that was really, kind of visually to see it, we want our staff to like report things, or our clients to report things whenever stuff looks strange. And it's, these are all kind of client submitted issues. This is, doesn't even include the, thousands upon thousands of messages that the anti-spam systems are blocking, right? But, at the volumes of email that we're seeing, even if 0.1% of things are getting through, it still makes a big impact. So again, just seeing like the amount of spam and spear phishing messages make it through and get reported, I think to me highlights, I think just the scale of the operation that we're kind of dealing with and trying to fight against.
And I think we're all feeling it, right? Like we're seeing more emails getting through to our inbox, and we have these different types of ways to get you that are getting through, like the QR code or the in-person. It's not all bad. Like I want to make sure we hit protecting your organization and what you can do, because I know you've made all of us feel a little bit anxious. So if we can get to the steps you should take, I'd love that.
Yes, and it's not all doom and gloom. So thanks for bringing us back to the things that we can do. So again, I'm a big policy person. Every organization really should make sure that they have these things in place. An IT acceptable use policy, right? That just kind of frames the general usage of how IT is handled at your organization. Include things like, do you use MFA? A list of your information systems. Do you have any sensitive information in them? Who has access, right? Just kind of a basic operating framework that forms the foundation of many other decisions. An incident response plan. When something bad does happen, how are you going to respond? Again, disaster recovery, that's more of like a data loss. And then kind of circling back up to the new one this year, which is AI acceptable use. AI is a tremendously powerful tool that we have, but it's also important that it's adopted, with great responsibility. And so I think as stewards of sensitive information, it's really important to have a clear understanding amongst the staff, like how are we going to use and adopt these tools? Security awareness training continues to be a really important piece. I keep harping on it. We've talked about it in a number of different ways, but it's true. I mean, just seeing that stat about how much stuff is making it through, even well-protected networks that have, lots of good anti-spam protections in place, the volume of this continues to increase. And so educating staff around, how to identify these attacks, right? How we identify these spoofed messages that are going through these proxies. What are our policies and how do we handle financial transactions, right? So if you get a link that says, or an email that says, please update my payroll, like the staff know, like what is the appropriate policy or procedure for updating payment information? Or if you change banks, like how do you talk to HR about it? And I'm sure it's not sending an email asking, how to do it, right? It's like, oh, go to your HR portal and here's the official steps. So having that education piece is important. Hopefully, and then the final piece I would say is, this update and upgrade MFA, right? So MFA is still important, and I could only imagine what our stats would look like if we hadn't had that big initiative on multi-factor authentication. But we are now updating our best practice recommendations to include the recommendation to use physical security keys, which are, as Microsoft says, phish resistant, right? So YubiKey or FIDO. And so these are keys that combine authentication that ties your login to your physical device that has this key. And so that means even if you go through a proxy, the hacker cannot take that token because your authentication is now tied to the device that you are logging in from. So that's the big recommendation. It can be a big change management exercise for organizations to go through. There is additional cost, right? So it's not like a free app that you can put on your phone. It might be a $20 security key, depending on your organization type. There are vendors that will give donations of these physical security keys. But that really is important, I would say, especially for high-risk positions. So again, your IT, your executive team, your finance team, your operations, right? HR, those roles are really targeted, right? The bad guys are using their tools to figure out who's in the HR position, who's in the finance department, who are the accounts payable people. Let's target them. And so those are the positions and roles that really should be looking at adopting physical security for physical MFA keys as part of their security protection approach, because if we can reduce risk in that area, then that helps the organization at large.
You can find more about what Community IT does around cybersecurity on our website. communityit.com/cybersecurity has all of our offerings there. And I did mention that there is a playbook that you can download. We have just a ton of webinars on cybersecurity, training advice, AI. We've done a couple on those. So there's a lot of resources there that I hope you'll look into. We have some time for Q&A, Matt. So one of the questions that came in is, what should you do if you think you did click on something suspicious? I think we've probably all been in that boat.
Yeah. So I think the first thing to do is, talk to your IT provider, if that's an in-house or you work with an MSP. They should be able to look through the logs and then, kind of see what's going on. So I think it's really important, and something that we do as part of our incident investigation, right? It's really important to establish the facts of what has happened. So we may take a different approach depending on the situation, but ultimately you may end up, resetting your password, re-enrolling MFA methods, but it's important to be really thorough. And so your IT team or your MSP partner should have really good processes and procedures in place to identify if an account has been compromised and then remediating it. And it needs to be really thorough because the threat actors are finding all kinds of different ways to maintain persistence into cloud accounts. And so just resetting your password or just enrolling new MFA may not be enough if they've, registered other applications or performed other actions. So talk to the IT team and then do some logging and you'll be able to identify kind of what happens.
Tell someone.
Tell someone. Yeah,
right
that's
away.
The most important thing.
Don't think that you can do it yourself. I actually have a friend who works in finance, and they had a wire fraud, and people got fired. Not because they had clicked on the link and sent the money. They got fired because they had covered it up. So for about a week, they tried to fix it themselves without letting anyone know that the money had gone to the wrong account. So you don't want to be in that situation. Tell someone right away. We have another question coming in. Is it dangerous to click on unsubscribe links? So when you get an email and it says you can unsubscribe from that mailing list, is that okay?
Yeah. So I think in general, yes, it is okay. And it's a good idea to unsubscribe from messages. I mean, I will say that, getting signed up for newsletters, people that are running newsletters, I think the bar now is pretty high in terms of having good processes and good procedures to add people onto your list, giving them a way to unsubscribe. And so I think, so, if you're getting emails from Macy's, and you don't want to get emails from Macy's anymore, yes, hitting unsubscribe is probably, effective. Now, if there's some dubious things and it looks pretty, kind of scammy,
right?
maybe you just end up blocking them. But
it's
yeah,
like
I think
Macy's with two Y's
right.
in the email. Then you got to have a look. But I think
Yeah.
if it looks legit, yeah, you should be able to unsubscribe from it.
Mm-hmm. And I think in general, if you can do that, that is preferred as opposed to like just blocking it yourself, or what we see is, forwarding it to the IT team and be like, hey, I just block this. I don't want to see it anymore. Because then you get into a situation of like, well, somebody else in your organization may want to continue to get those emails from Macy's. And if you block it, then nobody else can get it. So legit messages that are just unwanted, you should feel okay unsubscribing. Things that are of dubious origin, use your judgment.
We have a couple more questions, but I think that's all the time that we have. Matt, I know, could you put up your link to make an appointment with you? You can also find that on our website, communityit.com/cybersecurity. It says schedule a free assessment. And that basically is a link that helps you get in touch with Matt so you can ask him your questions about your specific situation. But the remaining questions, I will try to put those in the transcript. So if we didn't get to your question, check back. I want to make sure to mention our learning objectives that we hope to, I feel like we covered this all pretty well. So basic approach to cybersecurity, learning the trends and the attacks and the organization protections, understanding this evolving security best practices, right? The MFA used to be enough, but now you need to take this extra step of having this physical key. Learning the role of governance policies and training and protecting your nonprofit from common scams. If you don't have a policy, your staff aren't going to know who they are supposed to talk to if they clicked on the wrong thing. So it's always important to have those basic policies. If you don't have those policies, you don't know where to start, you want to make sure you revise them. Do you need to involve HR? Do they need to be in the employee handbook? How do you train your employees on those new policies if they are new? So we're going to be diving into all of that. So don't fear. Like we always say, you need to have policies. And then if you're saying, but how, we're going to talk about it next month. So I hope you'll return for that. Matt, I want to thank you so much for answering so many of our questions and just sharing your expertise and all this analysis with us today. It was just a pleasure to talk to you. And I'm getting a lot of good responses in the chat as well. Thank you. It was very informative and very helpful. So for everyone on the webinar, I hope that you're feeling a little bit more informed and can make some good decisions. Matt, thank you so much for helping us out today.
Great. Well, thank you. I always look forward to being able to talk about this topic because I think it's so important. And, the more education that I think we can share about this, the better we'll all be as a sector.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.